Mia and I used to be close, inseparable, even, but now, I could barely remember the last time we shared a genuine laugh. Our relationship had changed gradually, becoming colder and more distant, a strange tension wrapping around us like an invisible barrier. It seemed that every day brought more friction. Mia had started picking at everything I did, from the way I handled my job to the way I spent my free time. She'd once loved my work in media production, even bragging to friends about my projects. But now she labeled it mediocre and going nowhere, insisting I should be chasing higher ambitions, climbing faster. According to her, I lacked drive, a word that stung more every time she said it. At first, I told myself it was just a rough patch, that Mia was stressed. After all, she'd always been strong-willed, a perfectionist. Her job as a project manager had made her a natural leader, but it also sometimes pushed her to see only flaws. I figured this was one of those times, and I'd just have to be patient. I kept telling myself, she'll come around, but months passed, and things only got worse. She became distant, emotionally detached, leaving little room for connection. Every conversation was an opportunity for her to criticize, for me to feel like I wasn't enough. I remember one dinner where she sat across from me, barely looking up from her phone. I asked her how her day was, and she sighed, "Fine," without even glancing up. I tried to push past it, to bring up a memory from our early days. But the attempt fell flat. She barely listened, her eyes glazing over as she scrolled through her messages. It wasn't just the emotional distance that hurt. It was the way she seemed to keep pulling further away. I began noticing that she didn't share details about her day like she used to. She was always in a rush, and "I'll tell you later" had become her go-to answer. I could feel her slipping away, but I didn't know how to stop it. I tried harder, making more time for us to spend together, suggesting date nights or simple things like a movie at home. But Mia dismissed my attempts as a waste of time or unnecessary. She was constantly on her phone, always busy with something I couldn't see or understand. And the harder I tried, the more it seemed to annoy her. And then there was Leon. At first, I thought nothing of his presence. He was a friend to both of us, someone we'd known for years. But recently, I noticed a shift in how she interacted with him. She seemed more lively around him, laughing at his jokes, leaning in just a little too close when they talked. It was subtle small things that maybe wouldn't have bothered me if I wasn't already questioning everything about us. But now, even a shared glance between them was enough to raise suspicion in my mind. One night, after another argument about finances, I asked her why she was so unhappy with me. She didn't respond right away, just looked at me as if she was sizing me up. Then she said, "Maybe you just need to do better." Her words stung like a slap in the face. I'd been doing everything I could to support us, working extra hours, saving where I could, but to her, it still wasn't enough. I started wondering if I was seeing things that weren't there, misinterpreting her every action. But the doubt gnawed at me, growing stronger every day. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, that this crisis was more than just a phase. It felt like the foundation of our marriage was slipping away, and I was powerless to stop it. Still, despite everything, I wanted to believe there was hope. My birthday was coming up, and part of me hoped that maybe she'd use the occasion to show she cared, that we could find a spark of what we once had. I imagined her planning something small but thoughtful, reminding me that our relationship still mattered to her. But deep down, a part of me doubted it. The trust and warmth we'd once had felt like distant memories, replaced by tension and distance. And I wondered, could we really survive this? Or were we just holding on to a past that no longer existed? The morning of my birthday, I woke up hopeful. Despite the distance between us, I thought maybe Mia would put aside her criticisms, if only for a day. I had convinced myself that this day might reignite something between us, even if just a spark. Later that evening, Mia handed me a gift, wrapped neatly, her expression unreadable. I held my breath, hoping the gesture would mean she was still invested in us. When I unwrapped it, I was surprised to see an expensive watch, one far beyond anything I'd ever buy for myself. A sudden rush of gratitude mixed with the hope that maybe I'd been wrong, that maybe she did still care. But then, as I opened the box fully, something else caught my eye, a small note folded at the bottom. Curious, I unfolded it. assuming it might be a thoughtful birthday message. But my heart sank as I read the words, "Can't wait to see you again. Love, M." The blood drained from my face. This note was not meant for me. The words swirled in my mind, each one a brutal confirmation of what I had feared. The tone, the intimacy, it was clear this was written for someone else. My hand tightened around the box, but I forced myself to keep calm, my mind racing to understand what I was seeing. Had Mia carelessly forgotten the note? Or had it simply fallen into the wrong place? I looked up at her, my face carefully blank. She smiled, oblivious, seemingly proud of the gift she had chosen, unaware of the storm raging inside me. I returned the smile, muttering a thank you, my voice sounding foreign, distant. But behind the polite mask, I was piecing together the ugly truth. My mind went to Leon. He was the only person who seemed close enough to her lately, and I couldn't shake the suspicion that it was him. I replayed their recent interactions in my head, those shared glances and hushed laughs that had bothered me for weeks. How could I have missed this? Was I just blind? Or had she been too good at hiding it? A cold rage settled over me, but I forced myself to remain calm, even to play along. I couldn't let her see that I knew. Confronting her now, in my state, would only lead to excuses, to denial, and I didn't want to give her the chance to twist her way out of this. No, I needed proof. I wanted the truth to stare her in the face, undeniable, so that she'd feel every ounce of betrayal I was feeling right now. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that note, those mocking words, "Can't wait to see you again." The words haunted me, clawing at my sanity. And in the dark, a painful decision took shape. I would find out everything. Every secret meeting, every lie, every excuse she'd spun to cover her tracks. I'd make sure she knew what it felt like to be on the other side of betrayal. The next day, I started my own quiet investigation. At work, I ordered a tracking app, something that would let me monitor her movements without her knowing. I also asked around among our mutual friends, subtly bringing up Leon and Mia in conversations, waiting to catch the slightest hint of confirmation. To my dismay, several friends mentioned seeing Mia and Leon together in ways that raised eyebrows. A dinner here, a quick coffee there. It wasn't enough to confirm anything outright, but each new piece added to my suspicions. Within days, the tracker was set up. I'd check the app whenever she left, watching her movements, comparing them against the alibis she casually offered me. She'd say she was heading to a meeting, but her location would show a cafe across town. Other times, she'd say she was visiting her sister, yet I'd see her car parked near Leon's building. Each lie cut deeper, leaving me feeling hollow and raw. One evening, I caught her in another lie. She said she was running late at work, so I checked the app. She wasn't at work, she was parked near Leon's place. I felt a strange calm wash over me, a numbness that came from finally having the confirmation I dreaded. The truth lay bare, and there was no more room for doubt. But even now, as angry as I was, I held back from confronting her. I wanted her to dig her own grave. I wanted her to think she had fooled me, to feel confident in her lies, so that when I finally confronted her, the betrayal would hit her with full force. She'd have no excuses left, no way to deny what she'd done. In the meantime, I decided to keep up appearances. I acted as if everything was fine, even affectionate at times, all while hiding the bitterness building up inside me. I knew what I had to do. Wait until the moment was right. Then, I'd bring it all to light, exposing every single lie. There was a certain grim satisfaction in knowing that her secret was no longer a secret. I was living in the dark shadows of her betrayal, but I was about to turn on the lights. After the shock of discovering Mia's betrayal, my initial fury simmered into something colder, more controlled. I knew I couldn't confront her yet. I wanted to see the whole picture. I needed every hidden detail, every piece of truth she thought she'd kept from me. My plan was to catch her in a way that would leave her no room for denial. Using the tracking app was only the start. I wanted to know more than just her location. I needed her words, her conversations. So, while she was out one evening, I set up small audio recorders in her car and her purse, devices small enough that she'd never notice. Then I waited, patiently, every day gathering pieces of a puzzle that, once completed, would reveal everything. The recordings became my grim reality check. At night, after Mia went to bed, I'd slip away to listen to her conversations from the day. The casual tones, the laughter, the hidden meanings, they all painted a picture of a woman I barely recognized. Sometimes I'd hear Leon's voice in the background, and the familiarity in their exchanges twisted the knife even deeper. He spoke to her in a way that once had been mine alone, as if he'd stepped into the life I'd built with her. One of the recordings captured a particularly painful conversation between them. She was laughing, her voice filled with a lightness she hadn't shown around me in months. "I can't believe we pulled this off," she said, her voice carrying a conspiratorial tone that left no doubt in my mind. They were both in on this, taking pleasure in what they'd managed to hide from me. It took everything I had to maintain my composure around her. Every time she looked at me, every innocent "How was your day?" felt like a cruel joke. I continued to act normal, pretending to accept her flimsy excuses for late nights or sudden plans. Each lie she told me fed into the anger boiling just under the surface, but I hid it well. My plan deepened as I went further into surveillance. I set up a hidden camera in our living room, positioned so it would capture any interactions between her and Leon if they ever met at our home. Mia rarely brought anyone over, but I didn't want to risk missing any piece of this story. Watching her from a distance, monitoring her calls, her movements, and her words, I began to understand the full scope of her betrayal. One evening, while reviewing footage, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Mia was sitting in our living room, laughing, her phone pressed to her ear. She leaned back, her entire posture relaxed, and I could tell she was talking to Leon. Her face lit up as she spoke, a warmth and ease that I hadn't seen in her for months. It was as though she had found a new life, one that didn't include me at all. The final confirmation came one night when I overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. Mia had excused herself to take a call in another room, and I followed at a distance, listening in from the hallway. Her voice was soft, affectionate. She spoke in half-whispers, the words intimate and unmistakably directed at Leon. She told him how much she missed him, how hard it was to keep up the facade with me. Each word felt like a slap, and yet, it solidified my resolve. That night, I could barely sleep. I replayed her words over and over, burning them into my mind. I knew she was no longer the person I thought I married. She had built a separate life, one in which I was just an inconvenience, a piece of her past she tolerated only because she hadn't figured out a way to be rid of me yet. But I'd give her the opportunity soon enough. I just needed the right moment. Even as I planned my next steps, I couldn't ignore the irony of it all. In watching Mia from a distance, I felt as if I was becoming a stranger to myself. Our home had turned into an observation point, and my role in her life shifted from husband to investigator. It was like I was haunting my own life, witnessing everything unravel from the shadows. Then, one afternoon, I received a message from one of our mutual friends that confirmed everything I had suspected. She casually mentioned seeing Mia and Leon at a small cafe on the other side of town. They looked so close, she'd said innocently, without a clue about the turmoil I'd been hiding. It was the last piece I needed, the external proof that Mia's betrayal extended beyond our home. It was public now, almost as if she didn't care who saw them together. With each passing day, I grew more certain of my plan. I didn't just want her to know I'd found out. I wanted her to feel the betrayal, to experience the cold shock that I'd felt reading that note. But even more than that, I wanted her to understand the depth of the damage she'd caused. I began making subtle changes around the house, small things only she'd notice. I started rearranging items, placing things slightly out of place, just enough to make her wonder if something was different. I'd ask her strange questions, watching her reaction closely, testing her responses. It was a game, a dark, silent game, and I was fully prepared to play it until she broke. Every night, I'd lie awake, imagining the day I'd confront her. I'd picture her face as I laid out every piece of evidence, every recording, every message. I wanted to watch her confidence crumble, to see her try to justify the lies, the deceit. And I knew that when the time came, I wouldn't hold back. But until that day arrived, I'd continue my surveillance, gathering every piece of the truth, ensuring that when her secrets finally shattered, There would be no room left for her to rebuild. In the quiet that followed my discoveries, the idea of revenge began to grow. I wanted Mia to feel what I felt: the crushing weight of betrayal, the shock, the helplessness. The more I thought about it, the clearer my plan became. I wouldn't just confront her. I'd make sure she felt the sting of betrayal in a way that would stay with her forever. That's when I started thinking about Sofia. She and I had known each other for years, friends since before Mia and I were together. She'd always been kind, supportive, and whenever we met, she'd subtly hint that she was there for me if I needed someone to talk to. Sofia had been single for some time, and though I'd never thought of her romantically, I found myself reaching out to her one evening, seeking company and, perhaps, an ally. We agreed to meet for coffee. At first, it was innocent enough, just two friends catching up. But as I sat across from her, I found myself talking more than I'd intended, sharing details about my struggles, about the widening distance between Mia and me, without mentioning Mia's betrayal. Sofia listened intently, her eyes soft with empathy, nodding as if she understood all too well. There was no judgment, no "I told you so," only a quiet understanding that I hadn't felt from anyone in a long time. When I left that evening, I realized I felt something I hadn't felt in ages: a sense of connection, even comfort. For the first time since discovering Mia's affair, the weight of betrayal seemed to ease, if only slightly. The way Sofia had listened, the warmth in her eyes, it stirred something in me. It was a stark contrast to the cold indifference I'd come to expect at home. I began to see Sofia more often, carefully spacing our meetings so Mia wouldn't notice. Each encounter felt like an escape, a chance to be myself again, free from the suffocating tension that had become my daily life. As we spent time together, my feelings deepened. I could tell Sofia was drawn to me too, and her presence became a balm to the wounds Mia had left. I didn't tell her the whole truth, only that Mia and I were going through a rough patch. But Sofia seemed to sense there was more, and she never pressed me for answers. One evening, as we strolled along the river, I found myself reaching for her hand. She didn't pull away. We walked in silence, the unspoken understanding between us stronger than words. I wasn't sure how far I'd take this, but I knew one thing. Mia's betrayal had given me the justification I needed. If she was going to discard everything we'd built, why should I feel guilty for finding solace elsewhere? The irony didn't escape me. While Mia thought she was sneaking around behind my back, I was hiding my own secret. Part of me wondered if I was any better than her, but that thought only fueled my resolve. If she could lie to my face, day in and day out, then I'd do the same. I'd let her live in her illusion a little longer, completely unaware of the storm I was preparing. Sofia and I grew closer with each meeting. She became my confidant, my escape, and a place to channel the pain and anger Mia had caused. She was everything Mia hadn't been for me in months: supportive, affectionate, and genuinely happy to be around me. I couldn't deny that I was drawn to her warmth, to the way she seemed to understand me without needing explanations. And maybe, on some level, I wanted Mia to catch on, to sense that she wasn't the only one keeping secrets. Yet, I was careful. I kept my interactions with Sofia discreet, aware that Mia's radar for suspicion was as sharp as mine had been. But even the thought of Mia discovering my meetings with Sofia filled me with a strange satisfaction. It was a taste of her own medicine, and I was becoming more convinced that she deserved every bit of it. Then, a plan began to form in my mind. I'd orchestrate a scenario that would expose everything at once, a grand reveal that would shatter any lingering illusions Mia had. I wanted her to understand the full extent of what she had thrown away. I started setting things in motion, carefully plotting a moment that would leave her no escape. It would be the perfect way to unmask her lies and reveal my own secret in one devastating blow. As I moved forward with my plan, my guilt lessened, replaced by a sense of justice. My meetings with Sofia intensified, and so did my desire to let Mia know she wasn't the only one leading a double life. Each time I returned home from an evening with Sofia, I felt an almost reckless thrill at how effortlessly I was deceiving Mia. She'd greet me at the door, barely glancing up from her phone, clueless that her own actions had led me to this. I set the date for Mia's downfall. I'd arrange a gathering at our home, inviting a few close friends, including Leon. I'd invite Sofia, too, introducing her as an old friend, knowing the unspoken tension would be thick enough to cut through. It was a gamble, but I was ready to risk everything. If Mia wanted to break the vows we'd made, then she'd see just how broken they really were. The irony of it all was that in planning my own revenge, I was starting to see a future without Mia, a future that felt lighter, freer. With each moment I spent with Sofia, my sense of obligation to Mia faded, replaced by a curiosity about what life might look like if I left the broken pieces behind. The path forward was becoming clearer with each secret, each hidden meeting, and every lie we both chose to believe. The night of the gathering approached, and I felt ready. I had planted every seed, set every piece in place, and all that was left was to watch it unfold. The night of the gathering arrived, and I could feel the weight of anticipation pressing down on me. I had arranged everything carefully, down to the smallest detail. I invited a few close friends, including Leon and, of course, Sofia. She understood the situation and agreed to attend, though she'd keep a low profile, only stepping in if the moment called for it. This would be the night when all the secrets unraveled, when Mia's carefully constructed web of lies would finally be exposed. As our guests trickled in, I maintained an outward calm, greeting each one with a smile that barely concealed the tension coiling inside me. Mia was in her element, hosting with the ease and charm she always displayed in public. Watching her laugh and joke as if nothing was amiss made my anger simmer just below the surface. She moved gracefully around the room, exchanging glances with Leon that she thought were subtle, but to me were glaringly obvious. I kept close tabs on everyone, especially on Leon. I could see him trying to act natural, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes whenever he looked my way. I wondered if he suspected that something was off, that I knew more than I let on. The two of them had grown so used to living this lie that they probably thought they could hide it forever. But tonight would prove them wrong. As the evening wore on, I watched Mia's interactions with Leon with a renewed sense of satisfaction. Each time she laughed a little too hard at one of his jokes or casually touched his arm, she unknowingly added fuel to the fire that was about to consume her carefully built facade. My patience was wearing thin, but I held back, letting her believe, just a little longer, that she was safe. After dinner, I gathered everyone in the living room. I stood by Mia, who beamed at our friends, completely unaware of the storm about to hit. I took a breath, then turned to her, deliberately keeping my voice steady as I started to speak. "There's something I've been meaning to bring up, something that's been on my mind," I began, looking at her directly. "I wanted to share something I found recently, a little note. It was hidden in the box of that watch you gave me." I paused, letting my words sink in as Mia's face shifted from relaxed to confused. She glanced nervously at Leon, a flicker of panic in her eyes that she tried to hide. I kept my gaze fixed on her, watching her attempt to maintain composure. "It was a sweet note, actually," I continued, voice steady but sharp. "It said, 'Can't wait to see you again. Love them.'" The room went silent. Every set of eyes turned toward Mia, whose face had gone pale. She stammered, searching for words, but none came. I could see her mind racing, scrambling to find an explanation. Finally, she managed a weak laugh, trying to dismiss it. "Oh, that was probably just a mistake, a joke," she said, glancing nervously at our friends, searching for an escape. But there was none. I leaned in, not letting her slip away so easily. "A mistake? With Leon's name attached to it?" I asked, my voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "I know, Mia. I've known for a while now." She froze, glancing at Leon, who sat rigid, his face drained of color. He seemed as stunned as Mia, caught entirely off guard by the confrontation. It was as if the reality of the situation had finally hit him, the gravity of their actions sinking in under the weight of everyone's stares. I turned to Leon. "So, Leon," I said coolly, "how long has this been going on? All those late meetings, the casual dinners. Were you just catching up with my wife, or was there more to it?" Leon shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet my eyes. He mumbled something incoherent, trying to brush it off, but I was done letting him hide. Mia, still at a loss for words, finally burst out, Alex, this isn't what you think. I can explain. Her voice trembled, the confidence she'd carried so casually now gone. But I didn't want her explanations. I wanted her to feel the shame, the embarrassment, of being caught in front of everyone she'd so easily deceived. I kept my voice steady, controlled, while I continued. Explain? Oh, please, go ahead, Mia. Explain what a mistake it was, how a casual friend suddenly became someone you'd throw your marriage away for. My voice was sharp, but I refused to let the anger consume me. I wanted this to be cold, calculated, the same way she betrayed me. The room remained silent, our friends watching in stunned disbelief. Leon looked ready to bolt, and Mia's face was a picture of defeat. I could see the realization dawn on her face there was no way out. Every lie she had told, every excuse, every cover story had fallen apart, leaving her exposed. In that moment, I turned to Sofia, who had been watching from a distance, her gaze supportive but unreadable. I gestured to her subtly, a silent signal, letting Mia see that I, too, had secrets she hadn't known about. Sofia approached, her expression calm, and placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but one that spoke volumes. Mia's eyes widened as she looked between us, comprehension dawning slowly. You're not the only one with options, Mia, I said softly, the coldness in my voice leaving no room for misunderstanding. You can have Leon, if that's what you want. But know this, I'm done with the lies, with the games. You've made your choice and I've made mine. Mia opened her mouth, as if to protest, but no words came. The room was silent, each guest taking in the gravity of what had just unfolded. I didn't wait for her response. I simply turned and left the room, Sofia walking beside me, leaving Mia and Leon to face the fallout of their choices. Outside, the cool night air felt like a balm against my skin. I had set the trap, and it had sprung perfectly. In exposing her betrayal, I had freed myself from the prison her lies had built around me. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly liberated. As the night air settled around me, I lingered just outside the house, listening to the muffled silence within. For months, I had imagined this moment. Mia caught, Leon exposed, both of them left to confront the wreckage of their lies. I felt Sofia's reassuring hand on my arm, her presence grounding me. But a small part of me still wanted a final word, a proper goodbye to the life I'd once fought to build. I told Sofia I'd be back in a moment and walked back inside, ready to confront Mia once and for all. I found her in the kitchen, alone. Our friends had made their hasty exits, leaving Mia to face the full weight of her actions. She sat at the table, her head in her hands, and when she looked up at me, her face was streaked with tears, her expression raw with regret. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of sympathy, but the image of Leon, his smug smile and easy laughs with her, quickly extinguished it. Why, Mia? I asked, keeping my voice as steady as I could. How did we end up here? Was all of it just a game to you? Her mouth opened, and she hesitated, struggling to find the words. Alex, she choked out, her voice breaking. It wasn't meant to be like this. I didn't want to hurt you. Her words were barely above a whisper. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Didn't want to hurt me? You've been lying to my face for months, Mia. Every late-night meeting, every work dinner with Leon, it was all a lie, wasn't it? She looked down, shame pooling in her eyes. Yes, she admitted, her voice small, barely audible. But it wasn't what you think. It wasn't serious. I was confused, lost. I didn't know what I wanted anymore. My anger flared, and I felt the last remnants of patience slipping away. Confused? Lost? You seemed perfectly clear when you were making plans with him, laughing behind my back. I took a step closer, the betrayal and hurt rising to the surface. How long, Mia? How long has this been going on? She bit her lip, struggling to hold back tears. Months, she finally whispered, unable to meet my gaze. But it wasn't serious, Alex. I swear. I just felt so distant from you. I needed something to feel. Alive. Her words cut deeper than I expected, as if each one twisted the knife already lodged in my chest. And you thought you could find that by tearing apart everything we built? I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay calm. Mia wiped a tear from her cheek, her face twisted in anguish. I know it sounds selfish, she admitted, but I was angry. You seemed so distant, so wrapped up in work, and I felt invisible. Leon, he noticed me in a way you hadn't in a long time. I shook my head, the sadness finally overpowering the anger. So, instead of talking to me, you decided to tear everything apart with him? You never thought I deserved the truth? She looked away, unable to face the hurt in my eyes. I was afraid of losing you, she said, her voice barely a whisper. And then it spiraled, and I didn't know how to stop. I thought maybe I could just pretend it never happened. A bitter laugh escaped my throat. Pretend? You were ready to live this lie for as long as you could, Mia. That's what you were hoping, wasn't it? That I'd stay oblivious, that you could have it all without ever facing the consequences. Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. The room fell silent, both of us standing there, locked in a moment that felt too surreal to be real. Finally, I took a breath, gathering the last of my resolve. I can't be with someone who treats love like it's disposable, Mia. I gave you everything, and you chose to throw it all away. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she looked at me, her face twisted in desperation. Please, Alex, she begged, her voice trembling. I'll do anything. I'll end things with Leon. I'll go to therapy. Whatever it takes. Just, please don't leave. I looked at her, feeling a strange mix of pity and detachment. You don't get it, do you? This isn't something you can just fix. You made your choice, Mia, and in doing so, you took away any choice I might have had. You decided this was over the moment you let him into your life. She reached for my hand, but I stepped back, the finality of my decision settling over me. We're done, Mia. There's no going back from this. At that moment, Leon reappeared in the doorway, looking hesitant and lost. I turned to him, my voice cold and steady. Congratulations, Leon, I said, my tone laced with sarcasm. You wanted her? You've got her. I hope it was worth it. Leon looked away, the reality of the situation finally catching up to him. He mumbled something that sounded like an apology, but I didn't need his excuses or apologies. They meant nothing to me. Turning back to Mia, I took one last look at her tear-streaked face, committing the image to memory. This was the woman I had once loved, but now, all I saw was a stranger. The trust, the love, everything we had built had crumbled, and there was nothing left to salvage. Without another word, I walked away, each step feeling like a release, a shedding of the weight I'd carried for so long. Outside, Sofia waited for me, her presence a reminder that there was a life beyond the betrayal, a chance to rebuild from the ashes of what had been destroyed. As we left together, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief, knowing that, for the first time in months, I was finally free. Mia and Leon could pick up the pieces of what was left, but I was done. I had confronted the truth, and now, I was ready to leave it behind. Walking away from the wreckage of my marriage that night felt like leaving behind a part of myself, a part I'd long outgrown. With Sofia by my side, I stepped into a world that suddenly felt wider, free from the suffocating weight of Mia's lies. A strange calm settled over me, a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. I knew that, despite the pain, this was the only path forward. I had broken free, and there was no looking back. The days following the confrontation were a blur of mixed emotions. At times, I'd catch myself reliving memories with Mia, wondering where it had all gone wrong. But each time, I reminded myself that those memories were from a life that no longer existed, shattered by her choices and the betrayal she'd hidden so well. There was no point in clinging to a past that had only been an illusion. Sofia was there for me through every step of this transition. She was a constant presence, someone who listened without judgment, who understood the quiet rage and sadness I felt without needing explanations. She didn't push me to open up, but whenever I wanted to talk, she was there, a quiet anchor holding me steady as I began the slow process of rebuilding my life. One evening, after a long day at work, Sofia invited me over for dinner. It was a simple meal, just the two of us, but it felt different. For the first time, I allowed myself to truly enjoy her company, to appreciate her warmth and humor without the shadow of guilt looming over me. We laughed and talked late into the night, sharing stories about our lives, our dreams, and the scars we each carried. As the weeks passed, Sofia became more than just a friend or confidant. She was someone who understood what it meant to start over, to leave behind a past riddled with mistakes and regrets. Slowly, I felt my heart open up again, the walls I'd built around myself beginning to crumble. It wasn't forced or rushed. It was a natural evolution, a quiet understanding that maybe, just maybe, happiness was still within reach. One weekend, Sofia and I decided to go on a hike to clear our minds and escape the weight of everything we'd both been through. The air was crisp, the trail winding through dense trees that eventually opened up to a breathtaking view of the valley below. We stood side by side, taking in the scenery, a sense of peace settling over us. Sofia turned to me, her gaze warm and steady. "Alex," she said softly, "you've been through so much. It's okay to let go, you know? To allow yourself to be happy again." I looked at her, her words settling deep within me. "I think I'm finally ready," I replied, surprised by how true it felt. The anger, the betrayal, they still lingered, but they no longer defined me. I had spent too long living in the shadow of what Mia had done, and now, standing here with Sofia, I felt a glimpse of something new, a life not tied to the past, but open to the future. In the months that followed, I finalized the divorce with Mia. It was a surprisingly quiet process, devoid of the anger and accusations I'd anticipated. She seemed resigned, perhaps finally realizing the gravity of what she'd lost. We met only a few times to sign papers, each encounter brief and civil, the words between us minimal. I could see the regret in her eyes, the sorrow for what she destroyed, but there was no turning back. I didn't need her apologies or explanations anymore. The chapter with Mia was over, and I had no desire to revisit it. I had spent enough time in the dark spaces of betrayal and loss. It was time to step fully into the light, leaving the shadows of the past behind. Sofia and I continued to grow closer, and our bond deepened in ways I hadn't expected. She understood the scars I carried and never tried to rush me through the healing. Being with her felt like coming up for air after drowning for so long, and she brought a lightness into my life that I hadn't realized I'd been missing. One evening, as we sat together on her porch, watching the sunset, Sofia took my hand in hers. She looked at me with a mixture of hope and affection, a silent question in her gaze. And for the first time, I felt truly ready to embrace the future. The wounds Mia had inflicted were still there, but they were healing, fading, replaced by something far more powerful, a sense of resilience, of self-worth that could no longer be broken. A few months later, I moved into a new apartment, one that felt like a fresh start in every way. Sofia helped me decorate, bringing her own warmth and creativity into the space. Together, we transformed the blank walls into a place filled with laughter and life, a home that was uniquely ours. Looking back, I realized that Mia's betrayal had been the catalyst for something I could never have foreseen. It had forced me to confront the parts of myself I'd neglected, to reclaim my strength and rebuild a life on my own terms. Sofia had been there through it all, a reminder that even after the worst pain, there is still the possibility of joy, of love, of a future unburdened by the past. One night, as we settled into our new home, Sofia looked at me and smiled. "Here's to new beginnings," she whispered, raising a glass in a quiet toast. "To new beginnings," I replied, my voice steady, filled with a peace I hadn't known in years. In that moment, I knew that everything had led me here, to this place of healing and hope. And as I looked into Sofia's eyes, I felt a deep sense of gratitude, not for the betrayal, but for the strength it had given me, for the path it had forced me to take, leading me to a new life and a love built on trust, honesty, and understanding. Finally, I was free from the pain of the past, and ready to embrace the future that lay ahead.